Hey there, friend. Welcome to the She Leads Real Estate Podcast, where we shine a light on the incredible women making waves in real estate leadership today. This podcast is all about celebrating the achievements, challenges, and insights of women who are driving the industry forward, from team leaders and brokerage owners to managers and trailblazing entrepreneurs. Each episode features candid conversations with inspiring women leaders who share their journeys, strategies, and advice for thriving in a competitive market. Whether you're currently leading a team, you manage a brokerage, or you're aspiring to step into a leadership role, She Leads Real Estate is your go-to resource for empowerment, inspiration, and actionable insight. Hi, I'm Su Sarvis, your host and experienced real estate broker professional, president of Realty Associates, and real estate coach. Previously, I've started a listing team, opened multiple offices, and have managed teams across the great state of Texas. I started this podcast to bring real stories of growth, leadership, and valuable, actionable advice directly to you from my guests. Join me as we connect with women who are driving real estate forward, and let's shape the future of the industry together. So who is our guest today? It is Ashlee Cervantes-Thomas, who is a seasoned security professional. She is the Vice President of California Association of Licensed Security Agencies, Guards, and Associates. She is the CEO of Guardian Protection Force. She and I met through social channels, and I was just taken aback by her energy, her love for the security industry. She is an MBA holder, and we got to talking the current state of safety for real estate professionals. September is Realtor Safety Month, and just last month in August, there was an agent who unfortunately did go missing in Ontario, Canada. And of course, being in Texas, we're all familiar with the Beverly Carter case out of Arkansas in 2014. And so I just thought this would be a great opportunity to take one of our very first episodes and really focus on something for the greater good, which is our Realtor Safety Month. So I am excited for us to hear from her and get some practical tips and knowledge that she is going to share with us today. Hey, Ashlee, thank you so much for joining us. We hit it off so well. I'm excited for you to share your safety knowledge and expertise with our audience. So why don't we just get started with your background, your story, and just how you got started.
Yes, first, let me just say thank you for having me on and thank you for doing this work. I think it's so important for us to have these conversations, and I love what you're doing for your community. My name is Ashlee Cervantes-Thomas. I am very proud to be CEO of Guardian Protection Force. We're a physical security provider specializing in armed security and executive protection. And my latest venture, I am CEO and founder of Guardian Secure Solutions, and we specialize in leveraging technology to support physical security operations for our clients all around the world.
Awesome. So tell us how you got started in this. Tell us your story. How did you get into protection services?
Yeah, I had a unique journey. Since the age of 4, I planned to be a teacher, which is a really wild jump into physical security. So I always planned to be a teacher. I even had aspirations to get into educational politics. I envisioned myself maybe being a superintendent of a school district or something along those lines. I graduated with my degree in education. And I don't know, for those of you that maybe were around, or maybe you had children in schools, or maybe some of you had some connection to education in California at that time, there were massive layoffs happening. And it was a really wild time, especially to be a young teacher in California, particularly. And I know in the real estate world, that was a wild time for other reasons, obviously.
Yes.
But so I had done all of this, and it had always been my goal and my plan. And then, as many of you can probably relate to listening in today, life had other plans for me. And so I had during my undergraduate time, I had done some retail work and I just by happenstance got plucked from the retail setting. I was just an associate, but I got plucked into loss prevention for a pretty large corporate retailer. And I got some phenomenal experience from that. I was the only in the division and in my team that looked like me. I was this young Hispanic female. I was the only female. All of the other gentlemen were older, white gentlemen. A lot of them had prior law enforcement or military experience. And so it was just this really unique opportunity that I said yes to. And it ended up being the foundation. So when I graduated college in 2010, I didn't have a lot of experience outside of that experience. And so that landed me a job working for a small private security company. They brought me in as their admin person. They wanted me to help them hire loss prevention agents since I had that experience. That sort of led to me getting more and more HR experience. And that's where the founder of Guardian Protection Force and we crossed paths and he hired me to be his HR director. And it just took off from there.
Blossomed from there. Awesome. When you and I spoke, I thought immediately, I want to have you on the show because I want you to talk to us about personal protection. What can we do as real estate professionals to stay safe with clients that we don't know, have never met? What has your experience been? What have you seen? How have you seen the world progressing in the past decade as far as personal safety and just your recommendations? You start us off.
Yeah, we should definitely dive into the flyer in a moment, but I'll start by saying this. At my company, our specialty, Guardian Protection Force, we have provided bodyguard services. Executive protection is the industry term for what most of you in Hollywood is dubbed bodyguards. And we've done that and I've learned that industry very well for 14 years. And I'll say that the number one takeaway for me as a woman operating and functioning in the world at large outside of my day job in this little bubble, one of the biggest takeaways that I have found is truly awareness, situational awareness, and really just understanding what's happening in the world around you. And I imagine that many of the ambitious women listening to your podcast right now own their own business and they operate on many different levels and they're trying to step out into their careers and they're trying to juggle maybe families and children and all the things that come with being a woman in this modern age. And I think it's so easy for us to be distracted. And I think when you're distracted, you are easy pickings. The founder of Guardian Protection Force is actually working on writing his first book. And I've had the privilege of reading it. And it is fascinating to hear his perspective. But basically, the way he describes it is in the world, there are basically three types of people. There are sheepdogs, and there are wolves. And so from his perspective as a seasoned bodyguard, he really comes to it from that standpoint. And so if there really are only those three buckets, then most of us fall into the category of sheep, right? And that's okay, but we have to be smart sheep, right? And we don't want to be the sheep wandering off to the wayside down by herself. We don't want to be the sheep walking through the dark grocery parking lot, looking on her phone, responding to the 25 emails to get to before she goes to bed at night, right? That is important, but not nearly as important as your safety. We do a lot of community outreach, a lot of community work. It's not our bread and butter per se, but we do women's basic self-defense classes. We do all of these things. And I'm sure you're all welcome. If you're in Northern California, we do the physical classes. We do some webinar type things that are just to get information out. If it's not through us, I'm sure you could go on a quick Google search and find something. And really, it's not to make the next Jackie Chan. It's not. That's not really the goal. The goal
That would be great. That would be great if it was. I just want to say, because how you should advertise it.
We all want to be Angelina Jolie and any one of her action films. But ultimately, if you walk away from either this podcast or a self-defense class, the one big takeaway, hopefully, is just going to be awareness. We have to be aware of our surroundings. And modern technology makes it so easy to fall into the trap of being distracted and being distracted all the time. So there's a million specific examples we could get into. I know we're limited on time, so maybe this is a good time to transition into the flyer that I created that I'm hoping will be some good quick takeaways.
Yes. And thank you for doing that. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, creating this tip sheet for us. Go through this for us and tell us anything we should think about with these, in addition to these, et cetera. Thank you for this. It's great.
Absolutely. And let me just say, it was so hard. We had 100 we wanted to do. So we condensed down to just 8. I have a pretty incredible team of some bad butt is how my children describe it because we try not to use curse words in our house. Bad butt women who
Yes.
work on my
I
team
love
here.
that. Thank you so much. I love that.
And so I sat down with a couple of them and we really tried to think through what were the things that we really want to say to women working out there in the real estate field that would be hopefully most helpful. Number one, inform someone of your whereabouts. So this is so huge. Please just make sure whether you do it through an app. I know there's a bunch of them. We started doing just a tiny bit of research on our end, and there's a bunch of different cool plugins that you can find, or just go old fashioned. Tell your mom, tell your husband, tell your girlfriend, like whoever it is, let someone know every single time you're going to a showing. I know we actually have one of my office manager here is in the process of buying her first home, and her realtor gives her this awesome route sheet, which I imagine many of you have different versions of that when they're going and they're looking at all these different houses on these different set deeds. So I imagine that if you can share it easily with your client, who else could you easily share it with? Hey, I'm leaving at 8 a.m. and here's my route sheet. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, really in line with that, there are so many different safety apps out there. I know you're doing some really great work in this space and getting the word out for some of the newest ones that are just now being developed. So I don't want to step on your toes because I'm sure you have an exciting podcast coming up soon with more information. But really, I think whether it's not to advertise, again, this isn't my business. So it's not to advertise anyone in particular, but using some I think is really critical.
Feel free. If I can read real quick, I've gotten these from nar.realtor/safety. But do know if you go there to look at some of their resources, I noticed, which is alarming. I noticed that when I clicked on some and went to the website, some of the companies are no longer in business. So I went through, I found 4. One is Insta Alert, one is Katana Safety, one is Forewarn, HAR, Houston Association of Realtors has this if you're a member. Forewarn, People Smart. So doing research on, a client that calls you that you're not familiar with, or even a referral that you are not familiar with, you need to, before you agree to meet with them, which should be in a public setting at the office, ask for a copy of their driver's license, or at the very least, at a public place like a coffee shop, look them up on Forewarn. Ask if they're pre-approved, ask them to get pre-approved. That someone else has to, kind of verify who they are in addition to you and Forewarn. So yeah, if you have a resource, Ashlee, feel free to share it.
It was such a heartbreaking story to hear about Beverly Carter in 2014 and just such a tragedy that I guess we'll never know, but probably could have been avoided. So the one that I found, my team and I did a little bit of research, safe showings. I loved where the direction of their app was going. The founder, she shares that she had a situation where she got a little bit unnerved and she started researching safety apps and none of them were really what she felt like she was looking for. And so such a cool story behind that. My team did a little bit of research on HomeSnap Pro, which it's not designed to be a safety app, but it has some safety features. So that might be something that some of your listeners are already using. I know sometimes it can be a pain to have yet another app, right? That's something that everybody across all industries is battling right now when you have too many platforms and then you don't actually use the platform. So ultimately, my recommendation for this is the best safety app is the one you'll use. That's heartbreaking to me, but it speaks to that problem where people get really excited about something and maybe they open it up once and then all of a sudden your memory's filling up on your phone and it's the first thing you go to delete. Ultimately, my tip for you is the best safety app is the one you will use.
Sharing your location with a friend, a relative, a spouse, whatever. It's so simple. It's right on your iPhone right there. And I was reading the 2023 residential NAR safety report, and it was saying that 75,000 real estate professionals reported having some type of crime committed against them in 2023. And yet only 65% meet with a prospective client that they've never met before in public or in a public place or at the office, meaning 35% don't. Yeah, anything that we can do to take a proactive step for sure. Okay, go ahead. I'm talking too much. Go ahead on your list though.
I think those are all really important stats that, again, it's not, I don't ever want to come across as an alarmist, but at the same time, those stats are alarming. I definitely think it's an important conversation to have. My third tip, limit personal information. I know that oftentimes one of the biggest selling points for realtors is that they're a member of the community that they are selling homes in. And I
Mhm.
know for me, that was big when my husband and I bought our first home and our second home. We used the same realtor, right? We've developed a personal relationship over the years with them. With that being said, it is really important to still protect and limit the personal information that you share. I think maybe over time you develop relationships and maybe you get a little bit more comfortable and maybe you have to make that decision of what's too close for comfort in terms of what you share with somebody you've been in a relationship with and you maybe had you've helped them through multiple home buying processes or you've helped them buy and sell and all of that fun stuff and your kids are on the same soccer team. Okay, maybe that's a little different, but I think just having that general awareness. Number four, consider position when walking with clients. This is something I have gotten to learn so much about as I've helped develop, again, teacher background. So, one of the core responsibilities I had when I started out as a human resources director was developing training modules. And so, we developed training modules for our executive protection agents, our bodyguards. And this is something that is so fascinating to me. And, obviously bodyguards are considering formations when they're walking. If you've got three bodyguards protecting their principal is what it's called, or imagine the celebrity, whoever your favorite celebrity is, right? Picture them in the middle and they have different formations that they work through and that they train and practice so that in different scenarios, they can easily move those formations. So you all don't have to keep all of that in your mind, but it is something worth paying attention to. Always making sure that you're considering both yourself and your client is the safest way to ensure your position of safety. What does that mean? You're considering both yourself and your client. So when you go to enter a room, when possible, you open the door and you step to the side and you allow them to walk in first. Not only is that courteous and feels really great for the client, it's also a position of safety for you. So one of the things that I think I've seen in your industry most often from personal experience, just observing, and then with talking with friends and associates that are realtors, is this is not something that's on their radar. You're eager and excited to show me this beautiful home that you think might be my dream or forever home. And so you're walking through and you're elaborating as you walk and talk and you're showing me all of the wonderful features. But in that moment, you're not actually considering your position. And so that's something that's really, I think, an easy skill to practice for very practical safety.
Very true. I feel a common phrase is never have your back to the client. So yeah, they should enter first. When you are opening the Supra or combo lockbox on the front door, don't stand in front of it with your back to the client that you've never met before in person. Try to stand to the side of it and reach. As awkward as that may sound, don't just full on have your back to them, even at the front door with the Supra. So
Yeah,
I just wanted to add that in there.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think when possible, I would even encourage you, and this is a delicate balance as well, but arriving before your client, right? So you don't even have that when possible. Not always, that's may not always be as easy as that sounds. Of course, I understand that too. My next tip is to carry personal safety tools. So there are a million different options in this arena. Some of the easiest are pepper spray, a whistle, a personal alarm. There's others that require training, additional training, such as a taser. I don't really love stun guns. And I don't really love stun gun taser combination. And that's just because in order to use a stun gun, you have to be in such close proximity that oftentimes my advice, and certainly when we do our women's basic self-defense classes, we don't ever want you that close to begin with. Again, same as the app, I will say the best personal safety tool is one that you will use and actually carry. What I don't want to see is you go out and buy this giant pepper spray and then it falls to the bottom of your bag and you never see it again. That doesn't do anyone any good. And so I think, again, whatever you're going to actually be able to carry on your person and have readily available because you just never know. And this is something that comes up all of the time in your industry, I'm sure, my limited exposure. And then just as I was doing some basic research, you all, much unfortunately, poor mailmen, might also encounter animals. And so something to consider, we're not even thinking worst case scenario where you get into some kind of uncomfortable altercation interaction with another person. You might run into an animal in the space that you're showing, or I can imagine a million different scenarios where that could play out. So personal safety tools aren't just used for that worst case scenario, right? They're used in many different settings. And again, squatters, right? That's another thing you don't, in an unknown, you're showing up to show the home. You showed up early, you're going to enter, and now you're surprised by somebody in the home that you were not expecting there, who may or may not be on drugs or has mental illness. There's just so many unknowns in that scenario specifically. And that's where, like I said, unfortunately, we get called a lot from realtors is that once they've shown up and they realize, oh no, we have a problem inside. So that's something to be aware
Well,
of as well.
and it's interesting. One of the statistics I looked up, it's only 47% of men and only 58% of women carry some kind of self-defense weapon or tool. And I remember hearing this back years ago when I was actively showing, you may have the best pepper spray in the world, but if it's 2 or 3 years old, you've never used it, replace that thing every year or two or whatever the manufacturer recommends. And you need to Google that. If you've been a real estate professional for 10 years and you've had the same glittery, sparkly, cute keychain pepper spray, it's probably expired by now. So
Yep.
definitely double check that. I remember when I heard that, I was like, oh, I never would have thought of that. So worth saying right now.
Absolutely. And the other thing I'll say is if you've never sprayed your pepper spray, that is something worth noting as well. When we do our women's basic self defense classes, we actually have the women spray it and we have a target that we use. And so we don't have to spray a real person, but there is some kickback that happens. And if you're not expecting that or you don't know what that feels like, I've seen, oh my gosh, so many women who are like, unsuspecting, like they're spraying it in this direction. And so they don't understand that they're going to get some back towards them as well. And so now all of a sudden they're like bent over, curled over, not expecting it. And now you've delayed the whole point of that was so you could get away. And again, if you've never actually used your pepper spray, that's something that you should look into as well. So if you are in a home, you have to know that you want to get out of there as quickly as possible once you've sprayed. It's a little different spraying outside versus in an enclosed room. So those are all really important things. And when you shared those statistics with me, I was really shocked. And obviously there's just so many different types of tools out there. So there's not a great excuse for not carrying anything. And I will just make one more note on this. I don't want to harp on this too much, but your biggest safety tool is always your cell phone. So keeping that in mind as well and knowing how to quickly make a call and having your emergency contact info set up in your cell phone. For those of you that have iPhone, it's all under the health app and you can go in and you can put all of your personal information so that in the event that something happens to you, let's say another worst case scenario, maybe you have a heart attack while showing and you have this brand new client who doesn't know anything about you, right? How are they going to call for help for you? Obviously, they're going to call 911. But if you have that information, your spouse, your emergency contact, whoever that may be, just makes it that much easier to get you the help and the support that you need in that unfortunate scenario.
Very true.
And again, I always share with people, my job is to be the doomsdayer. So I always talk about these really hard what if scenarios. That's literally my job and my title and my roles. Hopefully I don't put too much of a damper on everyone's day, but just things to think through. We got to call out the elephant in the room.
I think if you have a team or a brokerage, you should be doing some kind of safety training free of charge, complimentary. You can get sponsored or pay for it at least once a quarter. I think that needs to be a minimum expectation because you have new agents joining your brokerage or team on a consistent rolling basis. So once a year, really, frankly, is not enough. This is a very important topic. Like I said earlier, there was just a case in the news in August. So definitely not doomsdayer, but I appreciate it.
I always harp on this. I opened with it. I'll probably close with it as well. But I put it right in the towards the middle of this list. Tip number 6 is stay aware of your surroundings. So all the time, wherever you are, you need to know where's the nearest exit. You need to know what are the nearest crossroads. Again, even for that unfortunate scenario where somebody has a health issue or some other type of any type of emergency, you need to have that ingrained in you, especially for our female realtors who are showing alone. That is just so important. And not just females, but unfortunately, we know statistically women are more likely to be victimized than men. That doesn't mean men shouldn't practice these things as well, but being aware, looking out for any suspicious behavior. Remember, when you're out there showing, it's not just your client that you're focused on, right? You need to be aware of your surroundings outside of the home, as well as, again, we're talking about squatters. So we call it in our industry, you have to avoid tunnel vision. When you're focused on one thing, particularly one thing right in front of you, it's really easy for the brain. It's actually an evolutionary trait that we learned to tune out everything around us. It was taught to us in schools, right? We were taught to focus, and it's actually contradictory to our survival or lizard brain, right? It's contradictory to the part of our brain that helps us to survive. And so there's so many great books about this, and lots of folks in my industry have gone public talking about how to help women in particular never ignore that side of your brain. It is just so important. If you feel any kind of inkling that something is off, honor that.
Yeah.
Your fear is a gift. And in fact, that's the name of one of the best books written about this. It's called The Gift of Fear. And it is wonderful written by somebody who came out of the private security industry. And he does a phenomenal job of talking about how your fear is truly a gift. And it's something we're taught, especially as women, to ignore, right? The overly helpful gentleman who just wants to help you carry your groceries and you said no thank you 3 times and he continues to try to help you carry your groceries. That's not you being rude to say, I said no thank you and I'm good.
Right.
That you said no thank you for a reason. And we want to honor that voice within you every single second of every single day. There's never a time when you should flip that switch and shut that off. Not when you're showing, not when you're prospecting with a new potential client. Like that voice is in you for a reason. So
Well,
again,
at the end, when you were talking about tunnel vision, I want to share a friend of a friend was actually attacked. Not the first time she showed this gentleman, not the second, but like the third or fourth. I could have the story incorrect, but it wasn't the first showing. It was
yeah,
the third or fourth instance on a different weekend of showing this person. And if you've never met that client before, you may start to let your guard down and start to
yeah,
slip and not, you may start to enter first because you're now showing them 3 weekends in a row and you've gotten comfortable with them. And the fact remains that you don't know them. I just wanted to point that out, especially when you're talking about tunnel vision. It made me
yeah.
think of that.
Yeah. And limiting your personal information, even though you showed them 3 or 4 times, you really don't know that person. And again, I think for women, we're conditioned from very young ages that it's rude to not be welcoming and friendly and open. I'm here to tell you it's not rude. It's smart. and that there is a way to be polite and respectful and say no, thank you the first 3 times. And then when you get to the fourth time, that's not the time to be polite and respectful anymore. And again, if anyone just gives you a vibe and you can't put your finger on it, that's what clients say to me most often. They will say, Ashlee, I can't explain it. It's just a feeling. That feeling is important. And so if you have a client that maybe you've shown once or twice and you had that feeling the whole time, I'll say more than once, certainly. At that point, maybe you ask someone to come along to your next showing. Maybe you just having that presence sometimes, you're like, you introduce them however you want. Maybe it's your husband or your brother or your best friend. Maybe you introduce them as your business partner, right? You don't necessarily have to say, I'm uncomfortable and I brought my husband along, right? You might say, oh, this is my business partner and he's going to help me with our showing today. There's a tip: avoid that tunnel vision, making sure that you're alert and in tune with your own fear, with your own inner knowing. And then that brings me, of course, to tip number 7, which is attend a self-defense class. The point of the class, the most important takeaway should always be how to increase your awareness and how to increase, even if it's just by 1%. I love when we talk about how do we do better every single day by 1%. If you attend a self-defense workshop a couple times a year, that's improvement. And I'll take that. I'll take that any day of the week if it makes somebody 1% safer. And obviously, if you find a really great one and it really sticks and it increases your awareness by 75 or 85%, that's even better. But remember, that's a lot of pressure to put on folks, especially if this is your first time maybe really considering this. I know for a lot of us, if you grew up in a rougher neighborhood, a lot of this comes really natural for you because it's instinctual, because it was quite literally maybe bred into you, right? You were maybe conditioned from a very early age. But there are many of us that grew up in great neighborhoods and they only experienced safety as a child. And so again, it becomes ingrained. It's that nurture versus nature conversation that we have to have around that. And it really does require some rewiring of your brain to learn to see things in a little bit of a different light, or just understand that unfortunately there are people out there that are more aligned with wolves than with the other 2 options. So that brings me to my last tip, number 8, smart. So again, remembering a couple of things that we've already touched on. Number 1, your concern has to be, your purview has to be a little bit wider. So we're not just worried about having a safe showing because the client could potentially be problematic for you. You have an entire neighborhood that you have to be aware of. And considering where you park from multiple layers. So number 1, you want to make sure that it's in a well-lit area, and really just please, dusk is really the absolute latest that I'm comfortable with you out there in the world with all of these unknowns, because we just know more crime happens when the sun goes down. It's just a fact of life. So making sure that you're parked in a well-lit area, but even better, don't be out and about at night. You also need to make sure there's no chance that your car can be blocked in. So I know, especially if you're arriving first, the natural thing to do would be to pull all the way up to the driveway. You pull in, you jump out, you're so excited, you get everything open. And now your prospect has come in and they've pulled in behind you. This is a really unfortunate position to have to take if something happens, which hopefully it never does, but we don't want to know. Making sure that you always have your keys in hand and you have the ability to exit quickly for whatever reason if needed. So whether that means parking at the very front, in front of the home, right? Just making sure that there's no way for you to get trapped or blocked in. And that is my last tip.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, all of those are such good, just refreshers, reminders, and all of them go hand in hand with, if you don't know the client that your prospective client that you're about to meet, never ever meet them for the first time at a house. Please do your, due diligence and look them up. Look at their social media. Look at them on Forewarn or whatever app background checker you may have. Meeting them at the office and asking to see their driver's license. Whatever you need to do to put yourself in the safest position possible because we are easy prey. We're out there with our faces and our phone numbers and our emails, and we're responsive and we're around all the time. And that's a selling point for our industries. Very well worth thinking about all of those things.
I did put a QR code. You can follow me on social media. One of the things that I've been getting a lot of requests for is more practical safety tips. So that's something that I'm trying to do more and more of. We also do a lot of free webinars. So I'd be happy to help or consult with anybody that has additional questions. And that's the best way to find me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram most often. And so those are great ways to connect and have some free resources thrown your way. And again, this isn't the core of our business, but I'm always happy as part of our community outreach to go do. We do lots of trainings on workplace violence prevention. I'm happy to translate that to realtor specific or brokerage specific trainings. If anybody has that need, I'm happy to help.
And I appreciate that you're sharing your tip sheet with us and giving that to us. I really appreciate it.
Hey again, it's me. Thanks for being here today. If you enjoyed what you heard, please feel free to rate, review, or share this podcast with someone that you think might benefit. We so appreciate you joining us today. Check us out next time on the She Leads Real Estate podcast with Su Sarvis.